Alright, it's time for the next project. I happen to be coming up on a year anniversary and I'm pretty excited about that, so I thought I'd make a jewelry box. Now, I have never made a jewelry box, so I'm gonna mess this up a lot, and you're gonna come along for that ride, and also hopefully along for the ride of me learning a bunch of new skills that I know I've been meaning to learn. It's based off a plan I saw on YouTube. I will certainly link that guy below, but in the meantime, I hope you enjoy this, and yeah, Mombo Woodworks, let's have some fun.
So selecting the lumber for this project was one of my favorite parts. The maple I got from Raleigh Reclaimed, and the walnut I got from a contact that my girlfriend gave to me. A friend of hers had a whole bunch of it in their garage, and I figured that'd be a much more meaningful way to put this box together was the wood that she was able to help me find. So I'm glad I did that. It's really nice stuff, and I'm very happy I used it. So you'll see later on the figure's great. This is the first project where I was able to use some of the new shop furniture I've built recently, which was one right there. You'll see the flip top table. My planer goes on top and my router table goes just underneath it, so I can get two tools in the space of one. That's really nice. And then above it, you'll see the hose is connected now to a boom arm, which keeps all the hoses off the ground and my shop a whole lot cleaner. I can't tell you how much of an upgrade that has been, and I'm very glad about that. From now on, whenever I mill this wood, I'm using sacrificial boards. It's the only way for me to get rid of the snipe, and I'm glad I figured this out because it helps a lot as well. So I ripped these sides down to their final dimension on the table saw, but I absolutely messed this up, as you will soon see. Yeah, I did not measure my miters the right way, so I ended up doing inside edge instead of the outside edge. This will make sense in a second, but it is what it is. Mistakes were made, so came over, cross-cut it on my cross-cut sled, and I'm glad that I built this thing. I need to build a new one. It's time for that. I'll probably film that, a couple more shop furniture pieces here soon. So you can see the figure on that walnut. It is beautiful wood, and I'm glad I was able to use this stuff, or at least most of it. You will see that I made a mistake here too. So again, first time making this jewelry box. Plenty of mistakes were made.
What is it? Measure twice, cut once? I have a better method. Measure 10 times, cut once, and still be wrong. That's what I did today. I'm really pleased with myself. Two things I did. First and foremost, I really wanted this to be a continuous pattern all the way around the box, right? And as a result of that, you have to cut the wood in a certain pattern. Long side, short side, long side, short side. I didn't. I did two long sides, two short sides. So there we go. There's that. That's still not fatal. I could still make it work and really not be too concerned about it. What I did next was I mismeasured the correct lengths and not including in the necessary change in distance because of the 45-degree bevel. So I'm losing a little bit on that. That's a bummer, and I really wish I hadn't done that. I'm gonna try to see if I can squeeze it in when I get the trays tomorrow, but likely I'm gonna have to throw these out, cut these down to this size, and make two more of these. So that'll be my process tomorrow if I have to. Okay, so after several hours of remilling and some much better measuring and using some more relative measurements, I finally have finished the outside frame of the box anyway. So I'm going to put this together. You'll see I'm kind of using an old trick that a lot of people use where I coat the back of this thing, or I should say cover the back of this thing in some painter's tape. And then because of the 45-degree miters that I've got cut into this thing, as I kind of put the pieces together and cut on those 45-degree angles, you can see the external frame of the box. I've also added a top and a bottom to this thing that are going to really be helpful to enclose it before I cut it open again to put an interior maple liner into it. But what I'm looking at now is, probably about an 1/8 inch, maybe a little more than an 1/8 inch. Cut a little rabbet into it, close this thing up, and sure enough, there we are. I did not videotape that process because I also made a lot of mistakes with that one. But I can certainly link to the video that helped me figure this out. But again, this is my first jewelry box, so learning a lot. Anyway, glue up time.
Well, like with any glue up, put on more glue than you think you should, especially on the end grain there. Even a little bit later on, I realized that it wasn't enough. The placement of the glue bottle is what I'm most impressed with in this shot. I think it's a great advertisement for Titebond 2 Premium wood glue. The strap clamp here was a lifesaver. I had been using 10 or 15 clamps to do these boxes beforehand, but this is just so much easier. So if you don't have one of these, get one of these. Clean up all the excess glue, made sure the whole thing was nice, and left it overnight.
Took the box out of our glue up here, and it's just time now to cut in some miter splines, and then I'll end up cutting the entire box open. I'm pleased with how it turned out, but now I get to do something I've never done before and make a jig for it, so here we go.
It's actually turned out to be a little bit of an easier process than I'd expected. Just a lot of repeat cuts and measuring the right way. It's aesthetic entirely as to what height you want these splines to be, but I figured I'd do one on the actual top of the box and then two on the body of the box.
Finished my splines here, and I'm pleased with how it turned out. I've got these two sizes. I made this one a little bit, one extra cut that I shouldn't have made, and so I had to go and plane some more maple down. Again, learning as we go here. So, but I've got two smaller ones down here. I really like this process. It's just a good look, and once I shave these or saw these down flush, they're gonna look slick. So I'll get to that next.
The glue up went smoothly. I just kind of coated these things, particularly on the inner edges there, with as much glue as I could. I think the next time I do this, I'll be more careful about making sure I have edge grain on all of them instead of end grain on some, just because of the expansion over time. I think it'll be fine. They're small enough pieces. Then finally let it glue overnight and came back and sawed this down. I found this part to be really satisfying, even though towards the end of it you'll see it's really uneven, and that's part of the process. A lot of sanding goes into making sure that these little splines become level with the face and edge. So it came back with my sandpaper, probably, I think I was at 180 grit here. You could just see all those lines disappearing over time, but you can see that little gap there on the sides.
So I had a couple of gaps in the corners there, and I filled them with the old glue and dust trick. Just to check on them and make sure that there's no open spots. So I'm gonna sand that down now, and then I'll go ahead and start to do the exterior finish.
I came back over it with a 220 grit sandpaper and made those gaps disappear. It was a simple trick I found. I think Steve Ramsey showed me this trick on YouTube. You just get whatever wood dust you're using, a little bit of wood glue, and then sand over the corners like you would any other corner, and the gaps disappear perfectly. So finished with the sanding, and then it was time for finishing.
Okay, so I finished the first coat of my wipe-on poly. That's my preferred finish for anything that's not going to be used for food. I just like the sheen and the way that it brings out the grain. So I really like the first coat. I did one coat while it was like this because it'll just lay a good base. Next is I've got to cut the top off, and finally I get to do that. This is the part that's making me the most panicked, because if I mess it up, it almost feels like I'm gonna have to start over. So I measured everything a bunch of times, and this time I think I got it right. So yeah, this is gonna be the moment of truth. All right, here we go.
This really was the moment of truth. If I messed up this cut, I had to go right back to the beginning, and I did not want to do that. So I cut here the long sides first, was very careful with what I was up to, and then put some carpentry shims, standard shims in there, taped the sides so that I had a little stability, particularly on this last cut. Having done something like this before where it moves around, that's not safe at all. Finished that, and then was able to start to take it apart.
All right, big reveal. Hey. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Yeah, buddy.
So now it was time to put finish on the inside parts of the box. I just did the bottom of the box and then came over into the top of the box. And then of course the edges. You'll see that I did not finish the inner walls of the box because I have to install the maple walls on there. And I figured the glue would adhere better to the wood than it would anything else. So I finally then came back and started to sand all that maple down. Really nothing much. I think it was 180 grit sandpaper here. Made sure I got the top and bottom. I did put a little bit of finish on them, the exposed parts anyway, because I knew it was going to be harder to kind of come in there and take care of it once it was glued on. So I did some of it there. Did do a second coat a little bit later on, but I was glad with how this turned out. Then it was time to clamp the inner maple walls, so I used 1,000 of them, let it dry for 3 or 4 hours, and then finally took them all off. I was glad with how that turned out. Then it was hinges time. Got these really cool brass hinges from Klingspor's woodworking shop. Love that place here in Raleigh. Went ahead and used I wanted to hand screw those in. The drill was too aggressive a process, and I don't want to mess this up, so kind of, did that carefully. Then finally came back to do one more coat of the wipe on polyurethane. So I'm using a soft sanding of 600 grit there. Finally, then one more coat being applied with my foam brush, and then let that dry overnight, and it looked like this. I'm really pleased with how this turned out. I think it'll be a really solid jewelry box for years to come. So the process was very, very enlightening, and I'm glad I picked up the tips and tricks I did along the way. Yeah, now I just gotta fill it with stuff, right? Anyway, Mombo Woodworks, thanks for coming along.